chapter 15, verses 11 to 32. I'll give you a chance to flip. From verse 11. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the other son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has come back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving away for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He is lost and is found.'"
G'day, my name's Josh. Today I'll be doing my best Barry White impersonation throughout the service. This is not my normal speaking voice, it's about 2 octaves lower. But just so you know, in case you're worried for me, I've been rat tested twice and I've had the full brain tickle by a professional, so we're all good to go. I really appreciate whoever asked this question. Am I ever doing enough? Am I ever doing enough? If you don't have to put your hand up, just as you hear that question, am I ever doing enough? Does that resonate with you and your life? A friend of mine, her name is Heidi, and there's someone in this room who actually knows her well, so I'm going to make sure I tell the truth about her today. But Heidi's got this wonderful blog. It's called Heidi Tai Writes. I recommend it to you. And Heidi tells the story of her life in her relationship with her dad. She said in one of her blog posts, I was 11 years old, sitting down, trying to do my maths homework. She's like, why am I the only Asian for whom maths makes no sense at all? So I'm sitting there tapping my pen on paper, tap, 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 the answers are not coming. It's 11 o'clock at night. It's way past my bedtime. And all I can hear is my dad's voice. Have you finished your maths homework yet? 11 o'clock. 11:30, 12 o'clock. And at that point, she's like, it's not coming, it's not happening. And she just thinks maybe I could give up and sneak up to bed and dad wouldn't know. Now, Heidi writes, growing up, my dad and I saw the world very differently. We came from 2 different generations, 2 different cultures. And we would clash for years. He would fail to meet my expectations of a loving father, and I would fail to meet his expectations of a respectful daughter. And one of the things that she said that really stuck with me was that she would pursue, as she grew up again and again, that she pursued excellence in so many fields, working harder and harder and harder. Because as she related to her dad, the one thing that's just stuck with her that she came to believe was that performance precedes acceptance. That performance precedes acceptance. Now, for her, that meant that even with her dad, to know that she was loved by her dad, that she was welcome at home, that she was affirmed, that she had succeeded as a daughter, the kind of daughter that he was raising her to be. She had to be good enough. She had to do enough. She had to do well enough. And she had to do it in the right things. She was very gifted. She is very gifted creatively, performance, music, drama, writing. But maths, not so much. Performance precedes acceptance. She said, for years, my trophy cabinet was full, and yet my heart felt hopelessly empty. And then one day it dawned on me that all of my striving would never appease my tiger dad's demands. And so I rebelled. You know, she asked herself the question, am I ever doing enough? And it wasn't just that question persisted for her, but it became really clear. It was, I can never do enough. I can't actually do enough to be accepted. So I've got to get out. I've got to just let go of this. I've got to stop caring what my dad thinks. I'm just going to go and do me, do my own thing. So she says, I just rebelled. I walked away. You know, as Heidi writes about this, she says, that was the same impression I had of God. Now, you know, I once believed Christians were called to obey this needy and overbearing tiger God. And having spent my whole life running away from my own, I was not keen on joining this institution built on rules and impossible expectations. And when I opened the Bible, like we just did, I expected to be crushed by shame and legalism. And I wonder for you guys, as you've walked into church today, whether you've been coming for a while, you've come with a friend today for the first time, you're listening here online, does that resonate with you? You know, what do you actually expect when you come to God? Is it with God as well that performance precedes acceptance? And if so, are you ever going to be doing enough? Have you done enough? Or is this some kind of crushing, weighty, load-ladening experience of life where the God that we've gathered around today to hear from is the same as the kind of tiger dad that Heidi knew growing up? Now, that's a really important question. It shapes so much about life. And even if you're here today and that's not the reason why you've come, it wasn't because you had that great question, am I ever doing enough with respect to God? I wonder if it still gets you, right? Am I ever doing enough? Am I ever doing enough with my work as a child, as a spouse, as a friend, as a parent, as an employee? Am I ever doing enough? If you think about that, performance precedes acceptance. You know, whose acceptance are you chasing over here? Is it your parents? Is it your dad? Is it your mum? Is it the acceptance of your peers that you need to measure up, fit in, look like, and then you'll be accepted? Is it what you're kind of reading and watching as you're online? Or perhaps it's the sense of, can I ever actually accept myself? can I ever actually accept myself? For so many of the high achievers out there, they're driven by something. Like they're performing at some excellent level because of something. I knew that for me as a teenager. It wasn't my parents. I think I wanted to perform to be able to accept myself. Do you resonate with that? But if you do, you might have tried some solutions, right? Because it's a pretty weighty experience of life to go through this great burden on us, thinking, I've got to do these things so I'll be accepted. And so we come up with different solutions. Have you tried these? Like one is to just go, I'm going to stop caring what other people think. I'm going to stop caring what other people think. I said this to Sarah the other day. Look, our topic is, am I ever doing enough? And what just immediately comes to your mind. And Sarah's like, oof, it just gets me as a mum. Like, that's the sense of, am I ever doing enough for my kids as a mum? And she shared with me the most common kind of mum post on Facebook, which was this really pain-filled post where this mum goes like, if I'm breastfeeding, then I'm not giving my kid enough nutrition. If I'm not fully breastfeeding, then I'm failing to look after them properly. If I'm going to work, then I'm neglecting them. If I'm not going to work, then I'm neglecting my family's finances. Like, I just can't win, whichever way I go. And so the author who's writing this and trying to give hope to mums who are heavy laden says to them, you've got to stop caring what people think. That was the great solution. You've just got to stop, just shut out the noise, right? And stop caring. Is that how you tend to go about it? It's probably the most common advice people can give you, like, right? Stop caring, shut out the noise. But that's actually a terrible, flawed solution if it's all you've got. There's two problems, right? One is you can't, right? Otherwise, people would have stopped reading the next mum blog and the next mum blog and the next mum blog. They wouldn't be going back for their daily shut out the noise post, yet they do. You can't, that's problem number one. But number two, succeeding would actually be worse. If you, in fact, could shut out the noise, right? If you could stop hearing what other people thought and you succeeded in that, you'd actually become conceited. You'd become so self-absorbed, so limited in your understanding of life, so limited and untethered, like limited to yourself and untethered from reality. You could not love people. You couldn't be kind. You couldn't grow in wisdom. You'd have no barometer for what was good in life. You would become conceited. See, to cut off other people is to cut yourself adrift. You can't live a loving or wise or kind life like that. The solution becomes much worse than the problem. So what are the other solutions we try? Well, like Heidi said, the second thing we often do is we just try and run. If we can't shut out the noise, maybe we can at least change the situation. Maybe we can get a new set of circumstances and make a fresh start, and that will be the place where we can actually belong and where we will be accepted. And so we change things. And we create buffers in life to get a break, and we plan the next holiday because we need a new environment. We go further and we change jobs. We go further still and we change relationships. For some of us, it means moving away from family. It can even mean abandoning children. At the extreme form, it's cutting people off altogether. And again, even as you hear that solution, right, you go, that's not going to fix things, right? It's not going to fix things because you lose. You lose your job. You lose your friends. You lose your family. You lose and other people lose you. They lose you. But even more, it doesn't deal with the heart issue, does it? That if we believe that performance precedes acceptance, we're going to bring this attitude and approach into all the work that we do and all the relationships we hold. And we're going to transfer this onto other people. And they're going to transfer it onto us. And nothing will change. You can't just do the first solution right. You can't just stop caring what other people think. You can't do the second thing either. You can't just run away from the problem. What does that leave? Well, I think it leaves the third thing, right? We try harder. We try harder. There's more pressure. There's less sleep. There's more tutors. There's higher goals. And we try harder. And the question doesn't go away. It doesn't change. Am I ever doing enough? And it eats at you, doesn't it? It's a life that's kind of driven by dissatisfaction, by insecurity. It's a life where the goalposts always move. And you go out and you perform and you get 100%. You're the top of the class. There is no one above you. It doesn't change the fact, does it, that you've not yet done enough? Because there's just another test. There's another game. There's another Monday. There's another nighttime. It's unrelenting. Have I ever done enough? Do you feel the weight of the burden? Like this is, hopefully I'm just describing to you what you feel, you experience. This is not rocket science. This is how we normally live. What a heavy burden. And especially where we started, this may be how we think about God. Have I ever done enough for God? You might remember last week, if you were here with us, as we explored the question. Now I forgot what the question is. Someone help me out. Something like, Rick? Are we all religions worshiping the same God? I couldn't remember how to phrase it. Are all religions worshiping the same God? So check that out, stuff on YouTube if you missed it. One of the great common features of these religions, even as they try and answer this similar set of questions like, is there a higher power and who or what is it? What happens when we die and what happens after? And so how do we live well now in the light of that higher power, death in the future? Like even as we answer all those questions, all the religions, apart from Christianity, come up with this solution. You have to do more. You have to do more. That's how you'll secure yourself for future beyond death. You have to do more. You have to do better than you currently are. And so we bring it into our relationships with others. We bring it in how we think about God. It's a heavy burden. And in fact, in the Old Testament, one of the things that the law of God does, his good and perfect law, it does put a burden upon us. And God shows us the most beautiful way to live, to love him with all of our heart and soul and mind and strength, to love others as ourselves. And if you played that out practically in life, you would see a tremendously different world, a beautiful world. And yet when you hear that as well, it lays a burden on us. If to do that is the basis of our belonging. And so as Jesus came, he said these words, which Francis read to us. He said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." That's Jesus' invitation. This is what he's inviting you to today. That's why what we're about to do is just kind of listen to him for the next 20 minutes, just soak in his words. Because all you need to come to him is this. You need to be weary and you need to be burdened. And he will give you rest. And he invites you to take my yoke upon you, learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And he says this with a promise, and you will find rest for your souls. Now, I'd love you to have your Bibles open at Luke chapter 15. Jesus has been teaching people about the kingdom of God, that is God's reign over over the people he's made, them joyfully worshiping him, the forgiveness of their sins, and the hope of this kingdom continuing into eternal life. And people have been coming to him divided. And you can see, if you cast your eyes back in chapter 15, verse 1, who's come to listen to Jesus today? Luke chapter 15, verse 1. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. It's kind of crowd number one, right? If you imagined a room, and Jesus is in the middle of it, all the people coming to sit close, they're the tax collectors and they're the sinners. Now, these are the people your mum said, don't play with them at school. When they get on the bus, you sit on the other side. When they get off the bus, you walk on the other side, right? The tax collectors and the sinners, the kind of traitorous, scumbag, robbers, using the legal power of Rome to take your money and give it to your invading conquerors, the tax collectors and the sinners, those who've got a reputation, right? What do you have to do in life that your reputation is simply the sinner? Right? These are the people who get close to listen to Jesus. And then you've got this fringe group, right, around the outside. And who are they? Just have a look down verse 2. Verse 2, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. You see who's on the outside listening in? It's the religious. It's the extraordinarily good people. The ones that your mum said, go and marry them. Go and hang out with them. If they sit on the bus, sit next to them. When they do their homework, copy it, right? So go and hang out with these people. These are the people who are accepted because their performance is extraordinary. They are elite in goodness. They're the ones on the outside muttering. You can see they've got some beef with Jesus. And so Jesus tells them three stories about something that's lost, that's found, and then there's a great celebration. In the third story, he tells it about a father who has two sons. Now, I don't think it would have been hard for the people listening to Jesus to realize he was telling them a story about themselves, right? It clicks pretty early on. You see it quickly. He tells them this story, verse 11. There was a man who had two sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. And so he divided his property between them. Now, this is called a parable, which is a story with a meaning. It's a meaning that's kind of hidden unless you really think about it, listen to what Jesus has to say. And so what that means is we should be looking for the meaning of a story. It's not just that you read the story and then go, that was entertaining, and you go, next time. You got to actually think into this. What's going on? Now, it doesn't mean also that every detail in the story will correspond to real life, but we'll see what happens. So Jesus' story has three characters. Did you see them? There's the father, the younger son, and the older son. And as we go through, you'll notice this. The father illustrates God. He illustrates God. He's the one who is mentioned in the earlier stories, the one who seeks and who rejoices like God does, who's delighted to find what was lost. And there is the younger son, the son who runs away. So much like the tax collectors and the sinners gathered in close. And there is the older son. And we get to see him last of all. And the story starts off with this shocking, rude request. Could you imagine saying this to your parents, right? Father, give me my share of the estate, right? Give me my share of the estate. Now, that's not just saying, give me half your money. It is saying that. It's also saying, give me half of your business, your livelihood. This is if you're a farmer, right? If you're a landowner and you make your livelihood from this, he's saying, give me half of everything you've got and everything you work on. It's not just taking half, it's diminishing his future as well. Give it to me, now. Now, that's a kind of request. I don't know, how would that fly if it happened in your family, right? My dad would just kind of, first he'd be massively insulted. Like, I don't know how he would repair this one. But the second thing is, he would just say no. Like, of course he would say no. Who would say yes? It's kind of like saying, Dad, I wish you were dead. I just want your stuff. I'd love to have it now. It's like a request fueled by greed and selfishness. He doesn't want what's best for his dad or his brother. He just wants his inheritance. But his dad does this weird, unusual thing. And he gives his son what he asks. He divides his estate between his sons. What does his son do with what he receives? Verse 13. Have a look. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. And the younger son doesn't take his money and carefully invest it and build up the farm into a greater business, honor his father in this way. He doesn't work his share of the estate and stay close and build a granny flat for his dad. He doesn't carefully manage this. He just further ruins his relationship with his father. First, he sells up the family land. Now, that's a really big deal. Land is so important to the Jews in a way that many of us will never kind of understand. The land that they had was their inheritance from God. You would only sell it to get out of the worst debt. This was your inheritance for your family for generation after generation. It was your gift from him. But the younger son cashes in his land for traveler's checks, disowns his father, leaves his people and his country, leaves God, and goes off and goes wild. And the younger son's motives for asking for that inheritance early are clear to us now, aren't they? He wanted the money so he could get cashed up, travel, and party. He's using his father and his father's generosity to live in this way that just kind of wastes everything. That's why this story is often called the story of the prodigal son. The prodigalness of it is that he's so extravagant in what he does, so wild in what he gives away. And he does it in such a way, this younger son, that just trashes everything about his father. And the wild living implies doing things here that are unclean, that are irresponsible, that are wicked. As the older brother says later, he squandered your property with prostitutes. Yeah, friends, that is a really helpful picture of what sin is. Sin is not just making mistakes. It's not just, no, if I had my opportunity again, I'd do differently. Then sin is rejecting God as our loving Father and living our own way by taking the good things we've received in this life from him and then just doing what we want, just living completely irrespectively independent of him, without giving him thanks, without seeking to use what we have to honor him. And so often we take these things like money and health and family and intelligence and school and we just kind of use them for ourselves. And there's no thankfulness, there's no honor given back. There's no even asking the question, God, how would I honor you with these things? That's what sin is. There's the sins, but there's the fundamental breaking of our relationship with God, where we don't love him. So what happens to this younger son? Well, Jesus continues, verse 14. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. Oof. Right. That's a low point. That's a low point for a Jew. But it gets lower. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. But it gets lower. No one gave him anything. The younger son spends everything. And this famine puts him in desperate needs. He needs to work now. He needs to get a job. The only one he can get is absolutely humiliating and demeaning. He has to join himself to a pig farmer. And pigs to Jews, they're the ultimate unclean, repulsive animal. They're unclean ceremonially to them. They make you unfit to enter into the presence of God, to celebrate the Jewish feasts. And they also just stink, right? We went to a pig farm. Well, it wasn't a full-on pig farm. It was a farm. There were pigs there. We stopped and looked at them. Man, they stank, right? We love looking at all the animals. You can smell where the pigs were from, like 100 meters away. And there they are, just, when pigs eat, they call it rooting in the muck, right? They dig in with their nose, they turn up mud, and they find the filthy things that are decaying underneath, and they eat that. They'll eat dead things. I like reading Jack Reacher novels. One of the things I learned from reading Reacher, if you ever have to dispose of a dead body, you just throw it where the pigs are, and it'll be gone. You don't have to worry about it. These are gross beasties. By the way, I love eating bacon. It's my top. But like a vegan working in an abattoir, this guy is doing a job that has all the moral wrongness for a Jew. And he's in such a desperate shape. He wants to get down there and he wants to eat the pig food. That's how starving hungry he is. But he's not even allowed to do that. He is so demeaned by his boss in his work situation. He's not even allowed to eat the pig. He's not even counted as worthy as a pig. That's how low he's gone. And they still won't give him anything. Utterly humiliated, unclean, broke, starving, and alone. Now, very few people drop this far down the well, do they? Yeah, but we all have our moments. This is the black pits of the drug users' hell. This is standing on the ledge of the tall building in the Great Depression. This is the moment after the affair has ended, and your spouse won't take you back, and your family won't see you, and you're left without a home, and your reputation is destroyed. This is that moment. Have you been there? Have you been there? Are you heading there? Is that why you're here? The tax collectors and the sinners gathering around Jesus to listen to him, they knew exactly what he meant, right? They knew what he meant. Like, you are talking about me. You're talking about me. They knew it. Do you know it? This younger son, he has nothing. This is where his choices, his sin, has taken him. It's the point of utter desperation. Fortunately, Jesus continues, verse 17. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired men have food to spare? And here I am, starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.'" Some people think that God is a crutch for people in hard times. Rick touched on this last week. I met a guy I'd known from some years back at the park the other day. And he said, a lot of people coming to church because of COVID. I thought, that's interesting. But sometimes it does, doesn't it? It takes that moment for everything to go wrong, for everything to be taken away, for you to come to your senses, just like it does for this younger son. We don't know how long he was in this before he lifted his head. But sometimes God does this. He will strip away everything so that we can just realize for a moment our poverty before him. And we can see clearly the foolishness of our sin. This plays out all across the Old Testament. And the younger son, as he's there, he remembers how good it was even the hired men, right? The hired men had food to spare who worked for his father. He comes to his senses, he remembers the wealth, the generosity of his father, whose men who worked for him had leftovers, supplied with more than they needed every day. And here he is, starving to death. And he must, at that moment, have remembered what it was like to not just be a hired servant, but to have been a son of that father. To have been a son. The love that his father lavished on him. And so he comes up with a game plan. There's this repentance, this turning around, born out of desperation. He will go back to his father. And he comes up with a threefold plan. Do you see it here? His plan is 1, I'm going to acknowledge my sin against my father and against God. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you, verse 18. 2, I'm going to acknowledge that I am unworthy to be called my father's son. And 3, I'm going to beg him for an opportunity to come back as a hired man. And the son doesn't think he can come back and everything will be like it was before, does it? That's not his expectation. He's like, I have wasted my father's inheritance. I have ruined his name. I am no son. I am not worthy. And you can imagine why, can't you? If you think into his shoes, right? You put yourself there. It's not hard. He doesn't think he deserves to come back as a son after what he did. He doesn't think that his father would give him that. He doesn't think his father should give him that. How would that be fair? No, he wants to do what's right. He wants to work to pay back his father for any kindness that his father will show to him. Now, that would be fair. Performance precedes acceptance. And so he goes back on this one chance. Maybe his dad will have him back. Verse 20. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. And he ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son returns to his father. What happens next is so totally unexpected. It's so shocking. It's as shocking as the start of the story, isn't it? And you can just imagine the tears in the eyes of the tax collectors and the sinners. The father, he sees his son from a distance, like he was looking. And what fills his father's heart at that point, it's not bitterness, it's not rage. My son would dare to come back. Finally, I can say what I think. No, what fills his heart, it's not even a little bit of pity. It's not even a small twinge of love. He is filled with compassion for him. Not revenge, not spitefulness, not even disappointment, right? But compassion. His father looks at this son, this lost son, with love, with forgiveness, with a desire to do good to him and to help him. And he doesn't just look and then sit on the deck and wait for his son to come crawling up the driveway. He runs to his son. He runs to him. An older man running to his boy, undignified in a culture where men wear robes. And when he gets to his son, what does he do? Throws his arms around his son. Kisses his son, this unwashed and starved and wicked and cruel and wasteful son. He openly welcomes him back without question, without reprimand. His father goes out to the son. And the son starts his speech, verse 21. It's time to put the 3 points into action. Number 1, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. Number 2, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, Bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger. Put sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast. Let's celebrate. This son of mine was dead and he's alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. Here the son starts on part 3 and he gets cut off before he can even ask for a job. His father has a message for the servants. Go, get the robe, get the ring, get the shoes. Dress him up like my son. He was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And as those sinners and tax collectors were listening to Jesus, they must have been there going, what are you saying? What are you saying? Are you saying that God will really welcome us home too? And the answer is yes. 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 This is the great news that God brings to us in the Bible. Yes, that we have sinned against heaven. We're not worthy to be called God's son or God's daughter. But he is the God who runs to us with open arms, who looks on us in our sins, and he is filled with compassion, and who rejoices to welcome someone who was dead and be made alive again, who was lost, but now found. It's not simply that we know this from Jesus' story here, that Jesus himself said, this is why I have come. He went to the home of a tax collector called Zacchaeus. Now, there are bad tax collectors, and Zacchaeus was their boss, right? So he was, right? He's the mafia kingpin of tax collectors. Jesus goes and has dinner with him. And at the end, everyone is shocked. And Jesus says, do you know why I've come, Zacchaeus? It's to seek and to save all that's lost. It's for you, Zacchaeus. It's for people like you. That this coming of Jesus to us is the running, hugging, kissing, forgiving, clothing, adopting demonstration of the love of God. Jesus coming to us is the Father running with his arms of love, coming to forgive our sins, coming to make us sons and daughters. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is this, Romans 5 verse 8. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Love precedes acceptance with God. The cross of Christ precedes acceptance. That's how Jesus comes to seek and to save what was lost. Not on a helicopter, on a cross. He comes to us arms open wide, his death, bringing us forgiveness, clothing us in his own righteousness, sharing with us his sonship, giving us the inheritance he receives from the Father. And how does God the Father feel about doing this for you and I? How does he feel about it? Is he bitter about it? Is he annoyed at what it cost? Does he whinge about it later? Is he ashamed to have such children? Does he welcome us home, but then put us in the basement, never to tell anyone? No, he throws a party. He throws a party. The Father welcomes this dishonorable son home, and then he throws a party so everyone can see how much he rejoices and is thrilled to have his son back, how much he loves his son, his compassion for his son. He's not shy in having you. He's not disappointed that it was you. It's genuine love shown in genuine public joy. And the story could finish there, couldn't it? It would be the best thing we had ever heard in our lives. But Jesus drives the point home for his listeners and for us by finishing with the older son. The older son. Because I think this helps us so much to clearly answer our question, have I ever done enough? See, the older son, meanwhile, verse 25, the older son is out in the field and he hears what's happening and he becomes angry and he refuses to go in. And you can imagine why. This son of yours, he says to his father. Look, all these years I've been slaving to you, he says to his father. I've never disobeyed your orders. You never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. And all the tax collectors and sinners are looking over at the Pharisees and the religious leaders and they're going, that's what you think, isn't it? That's what you're thinking right now as we're listening to Jesus and he's saying, this is what God is like. You're angry. You're muttering. How can this man welcome sinners and eat with them? You see the way that these religious leaders, these people who've performed so well, how they see God. I have slaved for you. I have never disobeyed you, yet you've given me nothing. That's how they see God. I have slaved for you. I have never disobeyed you, and you've given me nothing. What do they think God is like? Don't they believe deeply performance precedes acceptance? And yet they have performed, but he has not delivered. This is the deep religious mindset that Jesus attacks again and again and again. That if you will do enough, God will do more for you. And the more you do for him, the more he'll do for you. And if you do enough, then you belong. And such a mindset cannot comprehend the love and compassion of God. And so the older son is outraged at his father because he thinks his father is stingy. His father is withholding. His father is a slave master. His father is loveless. He's the kind of father you could work for and never disobey, and yet you have never done enough. 11:30, 12 p.m. at night, and you have never done enough. You have never done enough. You have never done enough. And so the older son is going, there is a double crime here. On the one hand, I have done all of this for you, and you have done nothing for me. And on the other, you pour out love and blessing on this son of yours who has done nothing but waste your possessions, nothing but bring dishonor in your name. And he's angry. He refuses to go in. And I ask you, are you angry? Would you be angry with God to see these sinners and tax collectors walk into heaven in front of you? Would you be angry to see God cuddle them in his arms? The father, how does the father treat the older son? The same way he treats the younger son. He goes out to him. He goes out to him when he won't come in himself. And he points out to his older son, you are more alike. His son says, this son of yours. And he says, your brother. Your brother. He says to his son, my son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. You don't know me, do you, son? Don't you remember at the very start, he divided his estate between them? You're always with me, and everything I have is yours. The older brother is lost, even though he was so close to home. And both brothers showed the same problem, didn't they? The younger son showed it in his speech. The older son showed it in his refusal to go in, that they believe God is stingy and performance precedes acceptance. But to both sons, the father leaves his house and he comes out to them with an invitation to come in. Have I ever done enough? And the answer is quite simple, friends. You couldn't do enough. But God has come to you. And it's his love shown in the cross of Jesus Christ that precedes acceptance. And I want to ask you, will you believe that? Will you receive that? To receive that kind of a welcome from God is to say, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And then just to be swallowed up in the forgiveness and the love of God, like a father wrapping his arms around a son. And to know that God is rejoicing, rejoicing that you would come home. I'm going to pray to give us an opportunity to say this sort of thing to God ourselves now. There'll be time for questions after that. Pray. Our Lord Jesus, you could see the heavy burden that's laid on us. And you can see just how much of a mess we make with our own lives. Both through our younger son times and our older son times. So we say, we have sinned against heaven. We're not worthy to be called your children. Please forgive us. And we rejoice. We trust that you do, that you've come to us in Jesus Christ, that you've adopted us, you've clothed us, you've forgiven us, you rejoice over us, you honor us. It's nothing that we deserve. We're so thankful. We are so relieved. We say thank you. Thank you. Amen.